Standby diesel generator. Your grid drops at 11 p.m. on a Tuesday, and your first instinct is to pull start the generator in the garage. That instinct is correct exactly until the engine won't fire, because the diesel you stored 14 months ago has already turned into a microbial colony. Diesel is a long-chain hydrocarbon fuel that ignites by compression, not spark. Cetane number determines ignition delay. A rating below 40 causes hard starts, uneven combustion, and progressive soot fouling on injector tips and cylinder walls. The storage failure mode is the one most people skip. Without a registered biocide additive, Hormoconus resinae, a filamentous fungus that feeds on hydrocarbons, colonizes the diesel water interface at the tank bottom within 60 to 90 days, producing acidic metabolites that plug filters and corrode injectors. Biodiesel blends above B5 are more susceptible because the ester fraction attracts water through hygroscopic absorption. Phase separation follows. What you thought was fuel is now a two-layer problem. Diesel standby power has industrial roots going back to the 1920s, when manufacturing plants needed grid-independent runtime for critical machinery. The thermodynamic argument is still valid. Diesel delivers roughly 35 megajoules per liter of stored energy. A lithium battery bank matching a 5 kilowatt generator's 48-hour runtime requires approximately 240 kilowatt hours. Hardware that weighs over 2,000 pounds at lead-acid energy density and costs more than most people's emergency fund. The fuel wins the weight to runtime comparison. The catch is that it's a consumable with a logistics chain, and the logistics chain is the fragile part. Treated rotated fuel stock, a filter rated under 10 microns, and a monthly manual test cycle are the protocol, not a bigger tank. Propane, LPG cylinder system. The reason propane feels like a cleaner backup than diesel is that you can't see it degrading. That invisibility is precisely the vulnerability. Liquefied petroleum gas stays liquid at approximately 125 to 150 psi at room temperature inside your steel cylinder. ASTM A372 Grade 5 metallurgy handles that pressure without drama under normal conditions. The corrosion failure is localized at the valve body, where oxygen and moisture from improperly sealed fittings run an electrochemical cell against the brass regulator over years of outdoor storage. Below freezing, propane's vapor pressure drops below the delivery threshold and the appliance starves, which happens precisely when you've decided the cylinder is your heating contingency. Prepare in silence. Audit your valve fittings before winter, not during it. The supply chain fragility is the structural argument here. Natural gas arrives through buried infrastructure with no on-site storage requirement. Bulk diesel can be treated and stored on-site for years. Propane cylinders have a 12-year recertification cycle in most jurisdictions, and the exchange network that refills them is a retail distribution chain that stops functioning when logistics break down. Your 20-pound cylinder at 40% fill is not a resilience plan. It's a bridge with an unknown far shore. If you want a tiered fuel storage breakdown comparing propane, diesel, and wood gas alternatives, that protocol is in the next upload. Rainwater harvesting cistern. I ran the catchment math on my own roof. At 1 inch of rainfall on a 1,500 square foot surface, you collect roughly 900 gallons, minus first flush contamination losses from bird deposits and particulate accumulation in dry periods. That number looks like security until you open the tank 6 weeks later. Polyethylene cisterns develop algal biofilm within 2 to 4 weeks in any light exposure. Beneath the surface layer, heterotrophic bacteria colonize the extracellular polymeric substance matrix the algae produce. That biofilm is a protected harbor for Legionella and Pseudomonas that household concentration chlorination cannot penetrate. UV disinfection eliminates free-swimming organisms but does not break biofilm structure. Pathogens in the matrix are physically shielded from UV photon dose. The correct protocol is physical tank scrub every 90 days, 2 to 6 ppm residual chlorine, and UV as a second independent barrier. Rural cistern systems going back to the 19th century maintained exactly this sequence. Modern prepping culture copies the hardware spec and skips the maintenance calendar. Prepare in silence, and that means scheduling the quarterly scrub now, before the pressure drops. Septic System. When municipal lift stations lose grid power, sewage backs up through gravity mains within hours. If you're bugging in at a structure on city sewer, the toilet you're relying on becomes a backflow point for the entire upstream segment. On-site septic solves the single-point failure of centralized treatment, but not in the way most people assume. A septic tank is an anaerobic digestion chamber. Methanogenic archaea convert organic acids and hydrogen to methane and CO2. Sulfate-reducing bacteria produce hydrogen sulfide as a byproduct. That's the odor signature of a failing system. The hydraulic loading limit, typically 120 gallons per day per bedroom under US code, exists because exceeding it saturates the leach field, kills the aerobic bacteria in the drain field, and produces a $15,000 to $25,000 remediation event with weeks of unusable sanitation. Root intrusion from trees planted within 10 feet of the lateral field can reduce effective field life from 25 years to under 10 by fracturing perforated pipe and collapsing trench geometry. Hardened and ready means documenting your leach field dimensions, your soil percolation rate, and your tree setback status before grid down, not after. If your property is on municipal sewer only, the audit you need is of the backup pumping capacity in your building's infrastructure. Long-term food stockpile. The freeze-dried meal industry markets a specific promise. 25-year shelf life, full nutrition, just add water. That first number is a taste stability claim. It is not a nutrient density claim. The distinction matters more than the price per serving. Water activity drives the microbial clock. Freeze-drying achieves water activity below 0.3, below the threshold for bacterial and mold growth. That's why the product doesn't spoil in the conventional sense. Lipid oxidation is a separate process that operates independently of moisture content through free radical chain reactions. Fats in freeze-dried products rancidify over a 5 to 10 year window regardless of sealed packaging. Products where fat exceeds 5% of caloric content are your highest decay rate entries. Number 10. Cans of vacuum-sealed hard wheat. Low fat, low water activity, nitrogen flushed, are legitimately stable past 25 years because the primary degradation pathways are all suppressed simultaneously. Retort canned goods are stable for 5 to 7 years before seal integrity becomes the limiting factor rather than food chemistry. Caloric labeling on long-term storage products does not disclose nutrient degradation. A can that tastes fine in year 20 may have lost 40% of its vitamin content in year 5. For the full stockpile audit protocol by category and rotation schedule, the breakdown is linked in the description. CO2 Scrubber. The first time I traced through a sealed shelter's atmospheric management problem end-to-end, I assumed CO2 removal was the hard constraint. It isn't. Removing CO2 is straightforward chemistry. What's hard is everything the bunker community doesn't talk about because it complicates the sales pitch. Soda lime, a mixture of calcium hydroxide and sodium hydroxide, absorbs CO2 through an exothermic reaction that produces water vapor and heat as byproducts. Lithium hydroxide delivers better mass efficiency and was the Navy submarine standard for exactly this reason. Less weight per gram of CO2 absorbed in a confined weight-critical application. The sorption capacity of a standard 2 to 4 kilogram soda lime charge runs approximately 8 to 12 hours for a 6-person group at normal respiratory rates before CO2 concentration crosses 1%, the threshold where cognitive performance begins measurably degrading before any occupant feels symptomatic. The moisture byproduct of the exothermic reaction creates colonization conditions for heterotrophic bacteria on the sorbent surface, adding a biological maintenance variable. None of that is the binding constraint. The binding constraint is oxygen replenishment. Chemical scrubbers remove CO2. They do not generate O2. A sealed space with functional CO2 scrubbing and no oxygen replenishment drops to hypoxic concentrations below 19.5% within 10 to 12 hours for a small group. Volatile organic compound off-gassing from sealed construction materials adds a third atmospheric variable that most shelter designs don't account for at all. Stay rational. This problem requires atmospheric mass flow modeling, not a parts list. The full sealed environment protocol, CO2, O2, VOC, and thermal load calculations is in the members section linked in the description. Get the actionable intel you need before the grid goes down. Every system in this catalog has a documented failure mode and a documented fix. Subscribe to stay ahead of the next outage. The breakdown continues right now. Battery bank. You've got solar panels on the roof and a battery bank in the basement. You've also built the most common false sense of energy independence in modern preparedness culture. Let's look at what you actually have. Lead acid chemistry has been the industrial standard since 1859. Flooded lead acid cells require periodic equalization charging, a deliberate controlled overcharge that resuspends lead sulfate crystals before they permanently plate the electrode surfaces. Miss 3 cycles of equalization and you lose up to 40% of nominal capacity through irreversible sulfation. Sealed AGM cells eliminate the electrolyte maintenance requirement, but are sensitive to deep discharge. Cycle them below 50% depth of discharge repeatedly, and you'll reduce rated cycle life from 500 cycles to under 200. Lithium iron phosphate chemistry tolerates deep cycling better and has no sulfation failure mode. But thermal runaway under physical damage or improper charge termination is a real-world event that propagates to adjacent cells if the bank isn't fused at module level with correctly rated protection. The nameplate capacity on your battery enclosure is measured at a 20-hour discharge rate under controlled temperature. Run the same bank at a 1-hour rate, cooking, refrigeration, and lighting simultaneously during a grid-down evening, and you'll extract roughly 60% of that rated number. The calculation you need is your actual watt-hour demand per 24-hour day, not the solar panel wattage. Run that number against your bank capacity. The gap is probably larger than your current design handles. Reinforced concrete bunker. The Cold War blast shelter spec that most commercial bunker designs trace back to was engineered for one event, a single overpressure pulse. Hardened and ready means interrogating what the structure does for the 18 months after that pulse. Concrete spalling, the fracture and surface ejection of cover material, is driven by embedded rebar corrosion. Chloride ions and carbonation fronts migrate through concrete at 0.5 to 1 millimeter per year in typical soil moisture conditions. At the rebar surface, the iron oxide corrosion product occupies roughly 3 times the volume of the original metal, generating internal tensile stress that cracks the matrix from within. A shelter poured in 1965 with 75 millimeters of cover over the rebar is approaching structural serviceability limits right now. The blast door overpressure rating, stated in pounds per square inch, says nothing about water infiltration through seismic-induced hairline cracks, nothing about radon gas accumulating from uranium decay in the surrounding soil. The EPA's primary source of indoor radon, which concentrates in below-grade sealed spaces to levels that exceed the 4 picocurie per liter action threshold, and nothing about the thermal bridging that turns a below-grade concrete shell into a condensation machine through seasonal temperature cycling. Before relying on any poured structure for extended occupancy, verify the inspection date and the maintenance record, not the marketing spec. Two-way radio. The first extended grid-down exercise I ran, I tested every radio system I had staged. The exercise was clarifying in ways I hadn't anticipated. FRS Radio's family radio service operate at up to 2 watts on 22 shared channels in the 462 and 467 megahertz band. The box says 35 miles. The physics says half a mile in an urban environment with building penetration loss of 10 to 30 decibels per wall. GMRS adds up to 50 watts and repeater access, which extends reliable range substantially, but repeater infrastructure runs on grid power or battery backup maintained by a local ham radio club. Both conditions that degrade exactly when the scenario driving your radio use is most severe. VHF ham radio on the 2-meter band extends line-of-sight range without repeaters. HF ham radio achieves continental range through ionospheric skip propagation, but requires a license, antenna infrastructure, and skill development that cannot be acquired post-event. Stay invisible means using the smallest RF signature footprint that completes the necessary information exchange, not defaulting to the loudest transmitter because it came with a color display. A layered radio protocol and from license-free simplex through licensed HF is in the description. Geiger Counter. Radiation detection instruments in the preparedness market span from a $35 pancake tube to a $1,400 calibrated dosimeter used in nuclear plant access control. The price difference reflects measurement physics that matter when the reading is an evacuation decision. A Geiger-Miller tube detects ionizing radiation, alpha, beta, and gamma, through ionization of low-pressure inert gas between a wire anode and a cylindrical cathode. Each ionization event produces a counted pulse. The instrument converts pulse rate to dose rate in microsieverts per hour. Calibration drift is the operational constraint. Geiger tubes shift from factory calibration at a rate dependent on cumulative exposure, age, and temperature cycling. An instrument not checked against a traceable radioactive standard in 24 months may read 30% above or below actual dose. Background variation produces false positive signals from cosmic ray shower events, proximity to granite counter surfaces, which emit up to 100 microsieverts per year, and medical radiological equipment. A single uncalibrated reading is not an evacuation trigger. Scintillation detectors using sodium iodide provide energy-resolved spectra that identify specific isotopes rather than aggregate dose, but cost more and are mechanically fragile. The correct detection protocol is layered, multiple instrument types, comparison against a known reference background, and temporal trend measurement over at least 30 minutes rather than one data point. Prepare in silence and verify your instrument's calibration date before the event, not during it. Mutual aid network. You've worked through every physical system in this catalog. Each one has a documented failure mode. The failure mode common to all of them is being the only person who knows how to maintain them. Human group behavior under resource scarcity follows patterns that small group anthropological research has documented across collapse scenarios spanning 4 continents and 6 centuries. Dunbar's number, approximately 150 stable social relationships, defines the cognitive ceiling for trust without formal institutional enforcement. Below that scale, reciprocal exchange operates on reputation maintained through repeated interaction. Above it, exchange requires explicit protocols. A barter arrangement with 2 neighbors is a social contract enforced by proximity and history. A barter arrangement with 200 people under resource scarcity is a legal system without an enforcement mechanism. And that system fails predictably when cortisol-driven short-term decision-making replaces long-term reciprocity reasoning, typically when caloric intake drops below maintenance threshold. The bunker isolation model fails because it treats security as a one-way gate. Resources and information enter, nothing leaves. That architecture eliminates the adaptive information flow, the signal about what's happening 4 blocks away. That constitutes situational awareness. A mutual aid cell of 8 to 15 people with defined roles, pre-negotiated exchange protocols, and a communication check-in cadence is a more resilient system than a solo bunker with 18 months of supplies and no external intelligence feed. The social architecture protocol, role definition, barter structure, security without isolation is in the description. The grid will fail someone somewhere this year. The question is whether you've engineered yourself out of that failure before the alert comes, or whether you're still running on the assumption that the hardware alone is enough.